Welcome, everyone, to the Complete Aviation Solutions Deep Dive, number 67.
Glad to be here.
Today, we're taking a closer look at what's happening with aircraft certification, specifically in Europe, and also digging into how international trade issues are shaking things up in aviation. We're drawing on some recent reports.
Yeah, and our aim is really to unpack all of this. What does it actually mean for, aircraft manufacturers and the airlines going forward?
It's fascinating, isn't it, how these two things, you've got the regulatory side, getting planes approved, and then the whole global trade picture, how they really interact.
They absolutely do. The ripple effects can be pretty significant across the industry.
Okay, so let's dive in. Starting with the COMAC C999, there was some talk about European certification happening relatively soon, but that seems to have changed.
That's right. Reports are indicating that the idea of the C999 getting certified in Europe in 2025, well, that's not going to happen.
Not happening in 2025, okay.
No. The European Union Aviation Safety Agency, ES, they've actually officially told COMAC this.
So EAS has given them a new time frame, or an estimate.
They have. The current projections coming from ESA suggest it's more likely to be, say, 3 to 6 years from now.
3 to 6 years. So we're looking at, what, 2028 to 2031, roughly.
Exactly. Somewhere in that window is the current expectation.
That's quite a shift from 2025.
Yeah.
What's behind that revised timeline? Is it just the complexity, or?
Well, it's a few things. ESA and COMAC have been talking for several years. But a really key point is that COMAC hasn't actually formally submitted their application for the certification yet.
Ah, okay, so the formal process hasn't even officially kicked off.
Precisely. That application is sort of the starting gun. And beyond that, I mean, certifying a completely new aircraft, especially from a manufacturer that doesn't have a long history in European markets, it's just a very thorough evaluation.
Right. Can you give us a sense of what that involves? What does EASA actually look at?
Oh, it's incredibly detailed. They need to validate the basic structure, the airframe itself, all the onboard systems, every component, really. And then, of course, there's extensive flight testing. They need proof it meets all of Europe's safety standards, under all sorts of conditions.
Sure. And just for context, for listeners maybe less familiar with the C919, how does it stack up against, say, the planes we fly on more often?
Size-wise, yeah, it's very much in the same category as the Airbus A320 or the Boeing 737, the standard single-aisle jets that are the backbone of many fleets.
Gotcha. But right now, it's only flying within China.
That's correct. As of now, no airlines outside of China are operating it.
Which really highlights why this European certification is such a big deal for COMAC.
Oh, absolutely. Getting that stamp of approval from an agency like EASA, which has such a strong international reputation, it's a huge validation.
So it could open doors elsewhere, too.
Definitely. It could really help their case with safety regulators in, other international markets. And EASA certification carries a lot of weight globally. It signals a certain level of safety and design maturity.
And it sounds like COMAC is really pushing for this.
Yes, reports suggest they're dedicating significant resources to it, both money and, engineering power. It seems to be a major strategic goal for them to compete internationally.
Okay, let's pivot slightly then. Let's talk about the other piece of this puzzle, international trade. Specifically, the U.S.-China tariff situation. This seems to be causing some, well, headaches for the established players.
That's putting it mildly, perhaps. Yes, the tariffs the U.S. has put in place have reportedly negatively affected both Chinese airlines and Boeing.
Right.
And China's position, as stated, is that these escalating tariffs are disrupting, the whole global supply chain structure. They argue it hinders international air travel and just normal trade and investment.
Can you give us an idea of the kind of tariffs we're talking about? What's the scale here?
Well, some recent examples, China put a 125% tariff on certain U.S. goods. That was reportedly after the U.S. implemented a 145% tariff on some Chinese imports. So these are not small adjustments.
Wow, 125%, 145%. That's huge. And what's the direct impact been on, say, Boeing delivering planes?
The immediate effect that's being reported is a halt, basically, in deliveries of new Boeing aircraft to Chinese carriers.
A complete stop.
That's what the reports suggest. And even more striking, apparently some Boeing planes that were already in China, just waiting for the final handover, have actually been sent back to the U.S.
Sent back. That sounds like a major disruption, not just a pause.
It certainly points to a significant breakdown in that part of the trade relationship, at least for now.
What's the general feeling from China on this whole trade spat?
Their public stance is pretty clear. they maintain that in a trade war or these kinds of tariff battles, there aren't any real winners in the end. And they
Mhm.
also point to the U.S. as the one who initiated this current round of tariffs.
Okay. And we have some numbers, right,
Okay.
about how many Boeing planes were actually on order by Chinese airlines.
We do. As of last week, the reports indicated Chinese Airlines had 137 Boeing aircraft on order. That's spread across 14 different airlines.
137, that's a lot of planes.
It is. And Boeing had apparently planned to deliver about 50 of those just in the remainder of 2025.
So those 50 deliveries are now uncertain, to say the least.
Highly uncertain, yes, given the current trade climate and the halt in deliveries.
Okay, so let's try and connect these dots. We've got
Okay.
the C919 certification timeline pushed back, but potentially happening down the line. And then we have these U.S.-China trade tensions making things difficult for Boeing, at least in the Chinese market. How do these two things potentially influence each other?
Well, this is where it gets really interesting. You could argue that the problems Boeing is facing potentially made worse by tariffs making their planes more expensive for Chinese airlines. That could actually create an opening for COMAC.
An opening. How so?
Well, think about it. If trade tensions continue and tariffs make Boeing jets significantly pricier or harder to get for Chinese airlines, COMAC's C919 being domestically produced might start looking like a much more attractive option for those airlines, purely from an economic or availability standpoint.
Right, a homegrown alternative becomes more appealing.
Exactly. And then if COMAC manages to get that EASA certification we talked about, even if it's a few years away,
That adds credibility.
massively. It boosts their credibility and marketability not just in China, but globally. It makes the C919 seem like a more viable, internationally recognized alternative, especially if these trade issues continue to put pressure on Boeing sales in key markets like China.
Okay, so wrapping this up then, what we're seeing is, on one hand, getting a new aircraft certified internationally is a long, tough process.
Hmm.
The C919 timeline really shows that.
Absolutely. The standards set by agencies like EASA are demanding, and it just takes time to meet them.
And then at the very same time, you've got these big global trade shifts like the U.S.-China tariffs, creating real headwinds, real problems for established manufacturers like Boeing.
Yeah, those tariffs aren't just abstract policy. They have direct consequences on cost, on deliveries, on business planning.
So it really looks like this intersection, this interplay between getting regulatory green lights and navigating these choppy waters of international trade
Uh-huh.
is going to be hugely important in deciding who the major players are in aviation in the coming years.
It really is. And, that brings up a question for you listening. When you think about these certification delays, these trade tensions, how might that eventually affect your own travel? Could it influence which airlines you fly with or even the types of aircraft available on certain routes down the line?
Yeah, it's something to consider. It's a dynamic situation constantly shifting, but hopefully this deep dive gave you a clearer picture of some of the major forces shaping things right now.